Dragger, an original novel by Robert Napier, narration and images powered by AI. Chapter 15, Dying Out Here. As the distance from home piled up behind her, Dex had to ask Captain Sano, "So who are you really?" "I'm a river pirate, all right, but I'm a lot of other things too. It's a secret, sister, but I'll tell you the truth. I used to be a Vinian knight." Did I say the truth? Well, I lived and trained on Vin my whole life. I was born in Ivanhoe. It's a town on the edge of the island. Walker here, Dweller and me, we go back a ways, you see. Did he ever tell you much about his wife? Dex loved Trek's stories about friends and family, and she remembered them well. She vigorously nodded to Lo, who looked over her shoulder at her. He did tell me she was Rowan's sister. That's right, Morwen Walker. She and I and a few others, we had our share of fun, let me tell you. Actually, it's a long story. One thing leads to another, and let's just say the Joe Zen ain't too fond of me anymore. And sister, the feeling's mutual. But back home, you said you made a deal with the Joe Zen. You said you want to be on the right side. Ruby says, I'm done dealing with that weed-eating bitch. See, me and Rowan have a deal. We're going to bust his commander out of that dungeon. Dex went cold. She couldn't believe what she just heard. There must have been some mistake. You'd risk Father's wrath. You can't do things like that. I can do whatever I want. You know, I used to be a knight, like Rowan. Now, I don't go in for all that duty and honor nonsense. But nobody deserves to rot in a gore-sty dungeon. She looked sympathetically over her shoulder at Dex, then added, Also, he's paying me. I should have known. Look, Dex, didn't we get along those times I was out at the farm? I like you. You've got an opportunity here. You see? Dex wasn't sure she could see any opportunity. She was only hoping for a way to justify all this to Father. After a long time, she whispered into Lo's hair, You would take me with you? Lo smiled back at her. There's no guarantee our plan will work. And even if it does, it's a harsh and dangerous world. I don't care, as long as it's away from Father and Ruby and Vago. Rowan rode his horse closer to Lo and Dex. There is much you must learn if you're coming with us. Dex shook the strange thoughts from her head. No, I've got to go home. It's late. We need your help, Dex, said Rowan. Dweller needs your help. And me, well, I'm too old for this shit. I can't do anything, moaned Dex. I've got so much work to do. I hate the Gorsty, but I'm nobody. Do you really believe that? Or is that what Ruby told you? Dex sighed. Oh, my auntie, how am I going to justify this? Help us, Dex. Look, I can get you into Gnarlstead. I won't say anything. You don't even need me. You've got the Rillers. And I don't know, maybe the Sawjaws. You're Vinian Knights. If that's how you really feel, said Rowan, I'll take you back right now. Dex couldn't hesitate any longer. This had all been a fun fantasy, but it was time to go home. She nodded resolutely to Rowan, and he welcomed her onto his horse. Lo grabbed her arm as she stepped away. Don't do this, Dee. Dex gently pulled free. Thanks for everything. Really, I've got to go back now. Dex climbed up behind Rowan, but before they could leave, Lo turned her horse into their path. She stared hard at Rowan. What the hell? You can't send her back there. Let's just take her as we agreed. You know I'm right. It has to be her choice, said Rowan as they pushed past. Rowan and Dex rode through the mist, swirling around them like a lonely house cat. The boundary between land and sky was blurred by a gray-blue haze hanging on the air in all directions. That's when they arrived at the broken wagon. It was as if Rowan's story had come to life right in front of them. But it wasn't just Rowan's story. It was her story too. The actions of yesterday flooded over her. They saw the bodies wasted in the grass. The blood couldn't soak into the oversaturated sand and seemed to float above the ground. The reddened weeds stood out sharply against the drab browns and yellows of the moors. One of the runkas had died where it fell, still harnessed to the wagon. The other had broken free and now grazed atop a nearby hill with leather and wood dangling on its flanks. Rowan dismounted, leaving her in charge of the steed. It felt appropriate to pause, but Dex couldn't stomach it. It was too much too soon. She hadn't wanted any of this to happen. She didn't look at Vegas resting against the wagon. She didn't look at his orange eyes faded and cold. She didn't look at his pale lips dripping thick blood. She didn't look at his kind hands stiff and curled like fallen leaves. She didn't look at his forced indifference to the moss and dew crawling over his body. This was her fault. She had wanted his attention. She had asked Ruby to buy the slaves. She had frightened them to run off. She had named the gores that followed the scent. She had enjoyed the chase. She had been proud to be a war ghoul, to be a child of Dragger. She had dared to hope for a family and to be loved. Unable to bear it any longer, she slid up in the saddle and whipped the reins across the horse's neck. She had to outrun all that guilt and misery. Outrun it straight over a cliff or down into a pit of old bones. She sped across the wasteland. This morning, she was frightened of the runkas. Now she terrorized the beast with her reckless flight. The runka, foaming and shrieking, reached the top of a bluff overlooking Gnarlstead, still far in the distance. Dex sat up as high as she could on the mount's back and saw Crushin's soldiers swarming the compound below. She jumped off the horse and stumbled around in a daze. This could only mean one thing. Father was here. Dex realized she couldn't come back alone and empty-handed. Bludge and Agatha and the others were probably already home and telling all kinds of stories. Oh, when they found out what all she had done, she would be beaten and humiliated. Or maybe she would be a hero. She escaped the pirates, survived overnight on the moor. She brought news of the missing slaves and their plans. Yes, Dex the hero. Justified. That would make her a war ghoul for sure. She paced frantically up and down the edge of the cliff, wringing her hands, sweating and shaking. Many things she could not remember, but she remembered starving in the gore sty and Ruby's whip biting her flesh. She couldn't leave. She couldn't go back. The runka was agitated, pawing and snorting. Dex had ridden the poor thing too hard. Calming herself, she approached it as she would a frightened gore. She rubbed the stiff fur under its chin and stroked its neck. Shh, she whispered. It's all right. Nobody is going to hurt you. She started to cry again. She pulled the horse's large head down so she could look into its bright orange eye. No one should ever hurt you. Dex was afraid of Dragger and Ruby and the gore sty, but she wasn't just afraid. She hated it. All of it. She had always hated it. She hated herself for hating it and never doing anything about it. With swift resolve, Dex mounted the horse and bolted away from Gnarlstead. There was a large fire blazing. As Rowan finished burning the swamp wagon, he arranged the sawjaw bodies neatly and respectfully, hoping the fire would signal his location to Dex. He had even managed to recover the surviving runka that had been pulling the wagon. At last, Dex appeared out of the mist. Rowan walked over to her. You've returned. Dex stared down at him from the horse's back. I want to come with you wherever you're going. I want to be free of Gnarlstead and Dragger and all of this. What changed your mind? Dex slid from the saddle and looked up at him. I guess I realized that if I went back now, I'd have to side with Ruby and Vago. I feared what they would do to me for being disloyal. But you never threatened me or whipped me. You let me decide on my own, even though I might betray you, and I really might have. You know, I guess I'm a coward, because I'm more afraid of living like a war ghoul than I am of dying out here.
Hello, listener. My name is Robert Napier. I just wanted to say thank you for your support. If you enjoy this content or have suggestions on how to improve on it, please leave a like or comment. It would mean a lot, and I'd really appreciate it. There's still much more to experience in the dark world of Dragger. Consider subscribing so you never miss an episode. Thank you.